You were telling me I need permission from your HOA to drive into my own house. That was the first thing I said at 6:10 on a Tuesday morning, sitting behind the wheel of my Ford F-250 with my headlights shining across a black steel gate that had not been there 4 days earlier. A green keypad blinked beside the driver's side post. Beep, beep, beep. Somewhere inside the control box, a tiny electronic relay clicked, but the gate did not move. I lowered my window and smelled wet concrete, fresh asphalt dust, and the damp Tennessee woods after an overnight rain. My name is Caleb Morgan. I was 45 years old, and for 12 years I had driven this same driveway from my house to Hickory Lane without asking anybody for a code. Now 2 steel posts stood across it, each anchored into pale concrete that still looked new enough to show trowel marks. A security camera pointed directly at my windshield. Then I saw a white Cadillac Escalade approaching from the Stonebridge Hills side. It stopped beyond the gate, and Patricia Caldwell stepped out carrying a clipboard. Everybody called her Patty. She was 54, president of the Stonebridge Hills Homeowners Association, and she walked toward me with the calm expression of someone arriving to explain a rule she had already decided I would follow. "Good morning, Caleb," she said. "You should have received the access registration form." I stared at her. "Why is there a gate across my driveway? This is a controlled HOA entrance now." She tapped the clipboard. "We have had concerns about unauthorized vehicles using Hickory Lane. The board approved enhanced security." "The board approved putting this here?" "Yes. On my driveway." Her expression tightened slightly. "Hickory Lane serves Stonebridge Hills. We cannot have unrestricted traffic entering the neighborhood." I shut off the truck. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. For a few seconds, all I could hear was water dripping from the oak trees and that keypad chirping every time Patty touched it. She explained that residents would receive permanent codes, approved vendors would use temporary codes, and visitors would need authorization. Then she handed me a form with the Stonebridge Hills logo at the top. "Fill this out and management can activate your permanent access by this afternoon." I looked at the paper, then back at her. "Patty, I do not live in Stonebridge Hills. Your property uses the same access corridor." "That is not what I said." She gave me the smile people use when they think patience means authority. "Caleb, nobody is trying to inconvenience you." I stepped out of the truck. My boots landed on wet asphalt. That was when something beside the right gatepost caught my eye. A small steel survey monument sat almost flush with the shoulder, stained brown from years of weather. I had mowed around that marker more times than I could count. The new concrete footing was only a few inches away from it. I crouched and brushed mud from the metal cap with my thumb. Patty sighed behind me. The contractors followed the approved plans. I stood slowly. I had spent 20 years working grading and drainage jobs. I knew what concrete cost. I knew what steel gates cost. More importantly, I knew what boundary markers were for. "Who gave your contractor permission to drill into this road?" I asked. Patty did not hesitate. "Caleb, this is the Stonebridge entrance now." I looked past her at the new camera, the keypad, and thousands of dollars of steel sitting across the only driveway to my house. Then I looked down at that old survey monument again. Patty thought the important question was who controlled the gate. I was beginning to wonder if she had ever asked who owned the ground holding it up. Hickory Lane had been carrying Morgan's home long before anyone poured the first foundation in Stonebridge Hills. My Uncle Ray bought the property in the late 1980s, back when 31 wooded acres outside Knoxville still felt like 31 wooded acres. There were no decorative streetlights beyond the ridge, no matching stone mailboxes, no homeowners association signs. Just hardwood trees, a narrow paved road, and a drainage ditch that turned brown and loud whenever a Tennessee storm rolled through. When I was 16, Uncle Ray taught me to drive his old Chevrolet pickup on that road. He would rest one hand against the dashboard and tell me to stay away from the soft shoulder near the culvert. Years later, after I bought the property from him, that same culvert became my problem. One spring storm washed gravel across the pavement and clogged the inlet with branches. I rented a mini excavator, cleared it myself, rebuilt the shoulder, and spent 2 Saturdays getting the water moving correctly again. Nobody from Stonebridge helped because Stonebridge did not exist yet. Nobody from the county sent a crew because that section of Hickory Lane was private. Over the years, I paid for cracked ceiling, gravel, drainage work, and eventually a new asphalt surface. I kept the invoices in a file cabinet in my home office because running a grading and drainage company had taught me to keep records for anything involving dirt, water, or property lines. The little steel survey monument beside the road had always been part of that landscape. I noticed it whenever I mowed the shoulder, a round metal cap barely above the soil, but I never had a reason to think much about it. Then, about 7 years after I bought the property, developers purchased the acreage east of mine. That became Stonebridge Hills. During construction, their project manager, a decent guy named Tom Harris, came to my house with a map and asked whether concrete trucks and grading equipment could temporarily use part of Hickory Lane. He did not arrive with demands. He asked. We signed paperwork. Their company agreed to repair any damage, and for nearly 18 months I watched dump trucks and excavators roll past my mailbox. When the last houses were finished, the heavy equipment disappeared. The road was repaired. I figured that was the end of it. Then Patty Caldwell became HOA president. At first, her changes seemed like ordinary neighborhood business. New landscaping at the entrance, matching signs, security cameras near the clubhouse. Then a sign appeared beside Hickory Lane reading Stonebridge Hills residents only. I called Patty and told her the sign was misleading because part of the road crossed my property and my house was not inside the subdivision. She said she would look into it. The sign stayed. A month later, a security vehicle began making slow passes near my driveway. Then came an email asking me to register my vehicles with the HOA management company. I declined. Patty replied that Stonebridge was standardizing access for safety reasons. I reminded her, in writing, that my property was outside the HOA and that no association rule applied to my driveway. Her answer was short. She said their attorney had reviewed the matter. That sentence bothered me enough that I printed the email and put it in my property file. Still, I did not expect a real confrontation. For days before I found that black gate, I left Knoxville for a grading job about 90 miles away. When I drove out that Thursday morning, Hickory Lane was open. The old survey monument sat beside the asphalt exactly where it always had. When I came home Monday night, it was raining hard and I entered from the opposite service side of my property, parked near my equipment shed, and went straight inside. I never saw the driveway entrance. By Tuesday morning, the rain had stopped. The gate had not been there when I left. Patty had built it while I was gone. The gate was only the latest thing Patty had tried to claim without ever asking me first. 6 months before that Tuesday morning, I came home from a drainage job and found a new metal sign planted beside Hickory Lane. Stonebridge Hills residents only. The sign stood about 20 feet from my driveway, surrounded by fresh mulch and 3 ornamental shrubs that definitely had not been there when I left for work. I called Patty before I even changed out of my muddy boots. That sign makes it look like my road belongs to Stonebridge, I told her. It identifies the neighborhood entrance, she said. Then put it on neighborhood property. There was a pause long enough for me to hear papers moving on her end. Caleb, we are trying to create a consistent appearance. Consistency does not move a property line. She promised to discuss it with the board. Nothing changed. A few weeks later, a security camera appeared on a pole overlooking Hickory Lane. Then a private patrol vehicle started making slow passes near my driveway in the evenings. One Friday, the driver stopped me while I was checking a drainage ditch and asked which Stonebridge address I lived at. None of them, I said. He looked genuinely confused. That was when I realized Patty had not simply changed the entrance. She had started teaching other people that my property was part of hers. The letters came next. One asked me to register my Ford F-250 with the management company. Another requested information about my work trailer because commercial vehicles were supposedly restricted after certain hours. I answered every notice the same way. Morgan property was not part of Stonebridge Hills, and the association had no authority over my vehicles or driveway. Patty replied with polished language about safety, shared access, and neighborhood standards. Then, 3 weeks before my grading job took me out of town, she sent the first notice mentioning a gate. It described a proposed controlled access system with cameras, keypad entry, and automatic closing after dark. I responded that same afternoon. I wrote that I did not consent to construction on my property and that no contractor had permission to excavate, drill, pour concrete, or install equipment anywhere inside my boundary. Patty answered 2 days later. Association Council has reviewed Stonebridge access rights, and the board intends to proceed with approved security improvements. I printed both emails and placed them beside the older construction paperwork from Tom Harris. Something about her wording bothered me. She never said the HOA owned the road. She never identified the exact easement. She just used phrases that sounded official enough to end the conversation. The following Thursday, I left for that grading project 90 miles away. Before pulling out, I stopped beside the shoulder and looked at the survey monument. Nothing had been marked for construction. No utility flags. No stakes. No contractor equipment. Hickory Lane looked exactly as it had for years. For days later, Patty had steel posts and concrete. By Tuesday afternoon, after our argument at the keypad, I called the security company whose number was printed on the control box. The technician told me the system belonged to Stonebridge Hills and that only HOA management could authorize permanent access credentials. I asked him one question. If they remove my code, can that gate keep my truck from reaching my house? He hesitated. If this is your only programmed entrance, yes, sir. I hung up and stared through my office window toward Hickory Lane. Patty had gone from putting up signs to controlling whether an electronic motor would let me cross my own driveway. That was no longer a neighborhood misunderstanding. It was a boundary dispute with electricity running through it. By 7:30 that Tuesday morning, I had already learned how effective Patty's new gate was, because it had successfully trapped me on the wrong side of my own driveway. She eventually entered a temporary code into the keypad, and the steel arm rolled open with a low electric hum. This code expires Friday, she said. You need to submit the registration form before then. I drove through without answering. That afternoon, I called the Knox County Sheriff's Office and explained that an HOA had installed a controlled gate across the access to my property. Deputy Daniel Reeves arrived a little after 4. The pavement was still damp beneath the trees, and the concrete around the posts had turned from pale gray to a darker shade as it cured. Patty arrived 10 minutes later carrying a binder. Of course she had a binder. I showed Daniel my deed, tax parcel map, photographs of the road before construction, and copies of the emails where I had specifically denied permission for installation work. Patty opened her binder and produced a subdivision plat along with an agreement dated from the years Stonebridge Hills was under construction. This grants access, she said. Daniel read it twice, then looked from Patty to me. I am not a surveyor, and I cannot determine a disputed property boundary standing beside the road. I am not asking you to decide the boundary, I said. I am asking whether she can lock me out of my house. He looked at the gate, then at the documents again. I can document the complaint, but if both sides are claiming rights under recorded property documents, this is likely going to be a civil matter until the title and easement questions are clarified. Patty folded her arms. Exactly. That single word told me she had expected this. She was not trying to prove anything beside the road. She only needed enough paperwork to keep anyone from ordering the gate removed immediately. Daniel suggested that Stonebridge maintain access for me while the dispute was reviewed. Patty agreed with the generous expression of someone offering me something she believed belonged to her. Before leaving, she gave me a temporary code printed on a small card. For the next 3 days, I had to type 6 digits into an HOA keypad every time I left my 31 acres. Wednesday morning, the gate opened. Wednesday evening, it took 2 attempts. Thursday at 6:45 in the morning, I entered the code and heard 3 sharp beeps. The screen flashed access denied. I tried again. Same result. My work trailer was hooked behind the Ford, and I had a crew waiting at a drainage site 25 miles away. I called the security company. They told me only Stonebridge management could authorize changes. I called management. Voicemail. I called Patty. No answer. For 28 minutes, I sat there watching condensation slide down my coffee cup while an electric gate decided whether I could go to work. Finally, a Stonebridge resident approached from the other side, entered a code, and the gate opened. I drove through before it closed. Friday afternoon, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was an invoice from Stonebridge Hills for $275. The description read Security Gate Installation and Maintenance Assessment. I actually laughed once when I saw it, but there was nothing funny about the second page. It warned that unpaid assessments could result in additional administrative charges. I carried the invoice into my office and laid it beside Patty's emails and the old construction agreement. Then I pulled out the property file I had not seriously examined in years. At the bottom was the survey from when I bought the land. I unfolded it across my desk until the paper covered half the surface. Hickory Lane curved through the parcel in thin black lines. Near the driveway entrance was a small survey symbol I recognized immediately. I looked through the window toward the steel monument beside Patty's new concrete footing. For days, I had been asking whether the HOA had the right to control the gate. That invoice made me realize I had been asking the wrong question. I needed to know exactly where their rights ended. Monday morning, I carried the old survey, Patty's $275 assessment, and every access document I could find into the county records office. The room smelled like paper, carpet cleaner, and burnt coffee, and by 8:45 I was sitting beside a clerk named Ellen Price while she pulled the recorded history for my 31 acres. I asked for everything tied to Hickory Lane, including easements, plats, right-of-way documents, and the agreement Stonebridge had shown Deputy Reeves. Ellen found the old construction agreement first. Seeing the actual recorded copy changed everything. The document gave the original developer temporary access across a defined portion of Hickory Lane for construction traffic while Stonebridge Hills was being built. It required the developer to repair damage when construction ended. I ran my finger beneath the expiration language twice. Nothing in it transferred ownership of the road. Nothing granted the Homeowners Association permanent control. Nothing mentioned gates. I paid for certified copies, then called Nathan Brooks, a licensed surveyor I had worked with on drainage projects for years. Nathan met me at the property shortly after noon. His tripod legs clicked against the asphalt while cicadas buzzed in the trees. I showed him the steel monument beside the gate. He brushed dirt from the cap, checked the markings, then started working backward through the recorded control points. I stayed quiet. Surveying rewards patience, and I wanted numbers, not guesses. Nathan moved down the shoulder, took another reading, checked the plat, then returned to the gate. His instrument chirped each time he recorded a point. Patty drove past once in her white Cadillac Escalade. She slowed when she saw us, but kept going. About 40 minutes later, Nathan pushed an orange stake into the grass beyond the gate. Then another. I looked from the stakes to the black steel posts. Where does Stonebridge's recorded boundary end? He checked his field controller. 23 feet back from this gate. I thought I had misunderstood him. 23 feet. Approximately, yes. I will verify everything before I certify it. But these monuments are matching the recorded plat. I pointed at the asphalt beneath our boots. And this section? Nathan looked down. Inside your parcel. The words landed differently than I expected. I did not feel excited. I felt still. For months, Patty had spoken about shared access, neighborhood security, and association authority, as if repetition could turn those phrases into property rights. The steel monument had been sitting beside the road the entire time. By Thursday, Nathan delivered the certified survey. Both gate posts were inside my property. The motor housing was inside my property. The keypad footing was inside my property. The section of Hickory Lane directly beneath the gate was inside my property. I took everything to attorney Rebecca Sloan, whose office overlooked downtown Knoxville. She read the construction agreement, then Nathan's survey, then Patty's emails. Finally, she placed the $275 assessment on top of the stack. They charged you to maintain a gate they installed on your land. That is what the invoice says. Rebecca leaned back. Do not touch the gate. I had been expecting her to tell me how quickly we could remove it. Instead, she tapped the survey. We give them the opportunity to correct this themselves. In writing. The next morning, Stonebridge Hills received formal notice demanding removal of the gate and restoration of the disturbed road surface. Patty responded before lunch. She rejected the demand and insisted the association had established access rights. I read her email twice, folded Nathan's survey, and walked outside. The black gate stood exactly where it had all week, perfectly straight, freshly painted, electronically controlled, and 23 feet beyond where Stonebridge's recorded property rights ended. For the first time since Patty installed it, I did not want that gate gone immediately. I wanted to see how far she was willing to defend it. Rebecca gave Stonebridge 10 business days to remove the gate, repair the asphalt around both concrete footings, and confirm in writing that the association would not interfere with my access again. Patty used 3 of those days to send another email explaining why she believed the survey was wrong. She used the 4th to have a gate technician service the motor. My camera caught his van arriving at 9:16 in the morning, crossing the orange survey stakes Nathan had placed, and parking entirely inside my parcel. I saved the footage. On day 6, Stonebridge's management company mailed me a second copy of the $275 assessment with a late notice attached. I saved that too. Rebecca called me that afternoon. Do not argue with them, she said. Every time they put something in writing, they are helping us establish what they are choosing to do after receiving notice. Waiting was difficult, but I understood the strategy. Patty expected me to get angry enough to touch the gate. I never did. Instead, I walked the property with Nathan again. The western shoulder beside the gate opened into a strip of ground between Hickory Lane and a line of mature oak trees. I had always treated it as nothing more than grass to mow. Nathan measured from the recorded boundary to the drainage swale. 28 feet at the narrowest usable section, he said. I looked toward the gate. Enough for a driveway? That depends on setbacks, drainage, utilities, and whatever local approvals apply. That was an answer I trusted. The next week became paperwork instead of confrontation. I checked utility locations. I confirmed the proposed route stayed inside my parcel. I reviewed drainage because the last thing I wanted was runoff washing across Hickory Lane during the first hard storm. I submitted the required local driveway and grading information, and I waited until everything I needed was cleared before moving a bucket of dirt. Patty must have noticed the utility flags because she appeared beside the gate one afternoon while I was marking elevations. What are you building? She asked. Access to my property. You already have access. I looked at the keypad. Apparently, that depends on whether your computer recognizes 6 numbers. Her mouth tightened. Any modification affecting the Stonebridge entrance requires board approval. This does not affect Stonebridge property. Our attorney may disagree. Then he can call Rebecca. I went back to my level. 2 mornings later, a dump truck delivered the first load of crushed limestone. The stone hit the ground with a rolling metallic roar, and pale dust drifted through the sunlight. I used my skid steer to strip the soft topsoil, shaped the base away from the drainage swale, compacted it, and brought in additional aggregate. I had built commercial access drives wider and more complicated than this one. What made this job different was the black steel gate standing 30 feet away, opening and closing every few minutes as Stonebridge residents entered codes. Patty came by twice that day. The second time she stayed in her Cadillac Escalade and watched through the windshield. By late afternoon, the new approach curved smoothly around the western end of the gate and rejoined my existing driveway on the other side, all without crossing the Stonebridge boundary Nathan had marked. I parked the skid steer, shut off the engine, and listened as the diesel rumble faded into cicadas. The gate was still standing exactly where Patty had put it. I had not cut a wire. I had not touched a post. I had not damaged $1 of HOA equipment. I simply moved the path my truck needed to follow. Just before sunset, I walked the new gravel route from one end to the other. At the midpoint, I could reach out and almost touch the black gate from the side. Almost. I kept my hands in my pockets. For weeks, Patty had controlled my driveway with a keypad. By morning, I would not need her keypad at all. At 6:15 the next morning, I started the Ford, watched the headlights wash across Patty's black steel gate, and never touched the keypad. I eased the truck left instead. The tires dropped onto the new crushed limestone with a deep crunch, followed the curve I had graded beside the oak trees, passed within 20 feet of the gate, and rolled onto Hickory Lane beyond it. No beep. No temporary code. No security company deciding whether I could leave for work. I checked the mirror as I reached the county road. The gate stood behind me, perfectly functional and completely irrelevant. By 7:30, Patty knew. I was loading drainage pipe at a supplier when my phone rang. Caleb, what did you do to the entrance? I used my driveway. You constructed an unauthorized roadway around the security gate. I constructed an access route on my property. That route affects Stonebridge. Nathan's certified survey says otherwise. She went quiet for half a second. You cannot simply bypass an HOA security system. I am not a member of your HOA. Hickory Lane serves this community. Serving your community does not make my land your community. She said the board would address it, then hung up. When I returned that afternoon, 3 Stonebridge residents were standing near the gate looking at the new route. One of them, a man named Eric Lawson, raised his hand as I passed. Did you really build around it? Everything you see on this side of the orange stakes is inside my parcel. He looked at the gate, then at the bypass, and laughed softly. So what exactly did our assessment pay for? I had no answer for him, but apparently Patty did. That evening, Stonebridge emailed residents saying the bypass was an unauthorized alteration that compromised neighborhood security. By breakfast the next morning, someone had forwarded me the message. Rebecca told me not to respond publicly. Let the survey speak, she said. So I did. I drove to work using the bypass. I came home using the bypass. Every trip made the same point without an argument. The gate opened for Stonebridge residents and closed behind them while my Ford simply curved around its western end. On Friday afternoon, Patty was waiting beside the new gravel when I returned. Her white Cadillac Escalade was parked near the keypad. She held a folder against her chest. The board expects you to close this route until our attorney reviews the matter. I stopped the truck, lowered the window, and looked at her. Show me the recorded document that gives Stonebridge authority over this strip. Our attorney is reviewing all applicable rights. Then when he finds one, Rebecca can read it. Patty glanced toward Nathan's orange stakes. You are deliberately undermining a community security improvement. No, I am deliberately staying on my own land. Her expression hardened. This is not finished. She walked back toward her vehicle. I watched her go, then noticed two Stonebridge residents standing near their mailboxes across the way. They had heard enough. By Monday, Rebecca received an email from Stonebridge's attorney asking for copies of Nathan's certified survey and the original construction agreement. We sent both. That afternoon, the gate maintenance company arrived again. Their technicians serviced the keypad, tested the motor, and watched the steel barrier slide open and shut 3 times. I stood beside my equipment shed drinking coffee while the sound carried through the trees. Thousands of dollars in steel, electronics, concrete, cameras, and maintenance were working exactly as designed. They could control everyone who drove through the gate. They just could not control me anymore. Patty waited until Tuesday morning to make her next move. At 7:12, my driveway camera sent an alert while I was drinking coffee in the kitchen. I opened the feed and saw a landscaping truck parked beside the bypass. 3 men in work shirts were unloading decorative limestone boulders, each one large enough to block a vehicle. Nathan's orange survey stakes were clearly visible less than 10 feet away. I called Rebecca before I walked outside. Record everything, she said. Do not move anything yourself. By the time I reached the road, the first boulder was sitting directly in the center of my new gravel approach. Morning, I said to the crew supervisor. Who authorized this? He checked a work order on his phone. Stonebridge Hills. Entrance landscaping adjustment. Did anyone show you the property survey? He shook his head. I pointed toward the orange stakes. This entire approach is inside my parcel. My attorney has already notified the association. His expression changed immediately. He stopped the crew and called his office. 10 minutes later, Patty arrived in her white Cadillac Escalade. She stepped out carrying the same kind of folder she always carried when she wanted a decision to look official. Those rocks are being placed to preserve the integrity of the controlled entrance, she said. They are being placed on my driveway. Your bypass was not approved. It does not require HOA approval. That is your interpretation. I held up my phone. Nathan's certified survey is not an interpretation. She looked at the camera mounted near my equipment shed, then back at the contractor. Finish the work. The supervisor did not move. Ma'am, I need confirmation from our office before we continue. Patty's face tightened. I called Deputy Daniel Reeves and gave him the incident number from his earlier visit. When he arrived, I handed him Rebecca's notice, Nathan's certified survey, photographs of the marked boundary, and the email showing Stonebridge had received all of it before that morning. Daniel studied the documents, then looked at the boulder. I am still not adjudicating title, he said carefully. But I am documenting that the association had notice of the surveyed boundary before this work was ordered. The landscaping company removed the single boulder before leaving. Nobody touched the others on the truck. That afternoon, Stonebridge's attorney called Rebecca. By Wednesday morning, the board had requested every email, invoice, contract, and authorization connected to the gate. That was when the story Patty had been telling began to fall apart. Eric Lawson called me that evening. He said residents had learned the gate project cost more than $30,000 between steel fabrication, electrical work, cameras, concrete, and installation. Worse, the board had apparently approved it based on Patty's representation that Stonebridge controlled the entrance. Rebecca later confirmed something even more important from the documents their attorney produced. Months earlier, Before construction began, Patty had received my written objection stating that the proposed gate location was on my property. She had forwarded my email to the management company with one sentence above it. Proceed while council reviews. Council had never issued a written opinion confirming ownership before the concrete was poured. On Thursday night, Stonebridge held an emergency board meeting at the clubhouse. I did not attend. I did not need to. At 9:18, Eric texted me 3 words: Patty is out. The board had removed her as president pending a full review of the project and appointed another director, Susan Miller, to handle negotiations with Rebecca. The next morning, I stood beside Hickory Lane while mist lifted through the oak trees. The black gate opened for a Stonebridge resident, paused, then slowly closed again. The motor hummed. The keypad flashed green. Everything still worked, but Patty no longer controlled it, and Stonebridge's new board finally understood the problem she had spent months refusing to see. They had paid more than $30,000 to install a security gate on land they had already been warned might not belong to them. Stonebridge's new board took 11 days to agree to terms, and by the end of those 11 days, nobody was calling Hickory Lane a shared HOA entrance anymore. Rebecca handled almost everything through their attorney. I stayed out of the arguments and kept using my bypass. The final agreement required Stonebridge to remove the gate, extract both concrete footings, repair the asphalt and shoulder, cancel the $275 assessment, reimburse my survey costs, cover the agreed portion of my legal expenses, and acknowledge in writing that the association had no ownership interest in the section of Hickory Lane inside my parcel. They also agreed that no future signs, cameras, barriers, landscaping, or access equipment would be installed on my property without written permission. I signed on a Thursday afternoon. The removal crew arrived the following Monday at 7:30 in the morning. I smelled diesel before I saw the trucks coming through the trees. A flatbed stopped beside the gate, followed by a small excavator and a utility truck from the company that had installed the electronics. Susan Miller, Stonebridge's acting president, met me beside the road with the work authorization in her hand. "Morning, Caleb," she said. "We are ready if you are." That sentence felt strange after months of Patty telling me what I was allowed to do on my own driveway. I nodded. "Go ahead." The technicians disconnected the keypad and motor first. The little green screen went dark. For the first time since the gate appeared, there was no electronic beep beside Hickory Lane. The crew unbolted the steel sections and lifted them carefully onto the flatbed. Nobody cheered. Nobody needed to. I stood near my Ford with a cup of coffee and watched thousands of dollars of unnecessary authority disappear one piece at a time. Then the excavator began removing the concrete around the first post. When the soil was cleared near the shoulder, Nathan's old steel survey monument appeared beside the disturbed ground. Mud covered most of the cap. I crouched and wiped it clean with my glove, exactly as I had done the morning Patty handed me that access registration form. The marker had never moved. The property line had never moved. Only Patty's assumptions had. By late afternoon, the gate was gone. 2 days later, fresh asphalt covered the repaired sections of Hickory Lane, and the shoulder was graded so water could reach the drainage swale properly again. I decided to keep the bypass. I added another layer of compacted stone and treated it as secondary access for my work equipment. It had cost me time and money, but I liked what it represented. Patty sold her house the following spring. I never spoke to her after the emergency board meeting. Stonebridge eventually installed a smaller security system farther inside the subdivision, this time on property the association actually controlled. Susan even sent me the survey before construction began. I laughed when I opened the email, but I appreciated it. One evening that summer, I drove home after finishing a drainage job west of Knoxville. The sun was dropping behind the oak trees, turning Hickory Lane gold through my windshield. I passed the place where the black gate had stood. No keypad. No camera pointed at my truck. No steel barrier waiting for 6 numbers. Just repaired asphalt, a clean shoulder, and that small survey monument beside the road. Patty had spent more than $30,000 trying to control who could pass through her gate. What she never understood was that the power was never in the steel, the motor, or the keypad. It was in the ground beneath them, and that ground had my name on the deed.